What is going on, everybody? Julio here. And in today's lesson, I'm going to be sharing with you some tips and techniques that I personally use to turn a design to code. And for this example, I will be using this design that I found in dribble.com. Now, without any further ado, let's jump right into it. So for this particular example, I'm going to be live coding, and that means that I don't have any reference code. I'm building out this project for the first time with you. So you kind of get to see my thought process throughout the whole thing. Now, the first step I take is saving this design as an image, and I'm not going to do that because I've already done so. Then the second step is taking the design into a tool such as Figma. And here, what you can do is use the rectangle tool, and you can map out the spacing by using a box. So here, for example, we can roughly estimate about 65 pixels of spacing on the top. And then we can assume that it's about the same here on the sides. Then you want to repeat the same process here for all the spacing that you have. And this is going to give you a rough estimate of all the spacing. Obviously, it's not going to be completely accurate, but there's only so much you can do when you don't have the design files. As far as the text size is, there's really not much you can do either because it's just a picture, so it's not like you can see it. So you just have to guess here and try to get as close as you possibly can. As far as the color scheme, I use an extension such as Colors by Fardos, and then I use the eyedropper here. And if you hover over the text or any other color, you can see that it gives you a close estimate of what the color is. Then you just click it, and from here you can just save it. So that's the basic gist of how we are going to be approaching this. Let's now go inside of Visual Studio Code, and we can continue. Now let's quickly go over the files that we have here. This is just a basic HTML5 template. We include the CDN for Remix icons since we will be using those. Then we link to the style sheet as well as the JavaScript file. Then within the style sheet, we import the Google fonts of Poppins since we are going to be using those. And that's going to be pretty much it. For the time being, something else to note is that we're going to be jumping back and forth between Visual Studio Code and the browser, just because I can't have it here on the side. The window would just be too small, and all of this would just be squished down to the point that we can't see anything. So let's go back to the spacing. So as I mentioned, here what we have is roughly about, let's say 65 pixels of spacing on the top. Then we can also assume that it will be roughly the same for the spacing on the left and right. And something I just noticed is that we have a border bottom here of some sort. And what I'm thinking is that if we, for example, applied the padding to this container, then this would be cut off. So we have to figure out a way that we can have this stretch all across. And what comes to mind is that we should probably apply this padding to this element all around and leave this alone so that it can stretch all the way. Then we can apply the same padding to this section of the element all around as well. So let's start with the top section first. First, we're going to need an overall wrapper, so I'm going to call this accordion. And then if you remember correctly, we had this data here, so I'm going to group them together, and I'm going to call this accordion header. Then we will have an h3 with the class of accordion title. And underneath a p tag with the class of accordion. Let's do description. We can just generate some dummy text here. And the text for the heading, several windows stacked on each other. So let's go ahead and take care of that. So if we go back to the design, then we need this border bottom here. So as mentioned, I'm going to be using an HR for this and call it border bottom, just like so. Now for this bottom section, we need to group each individual item by themselves, and we're going to be having 4 of them. I also wanted to group these two together since I will be using Flexbox here for the alignment. So let's go ahead and take care of that. This one I'm going to call accordion item, and inside of it I'm just going to have another header. So let's actually use the header tag as opposed to a div, since it would be more meaningful, just like so. And then we'll do the same thing here. So header, and then we can say accordion item header. And here we will have the button. The button will have the class of accordion item button. And here we will have 2 icons, but we will revisit this shortly. And then underneath, we had the question. So accordion item question. For that, we can just use, let's use another H3. Accordion item question. And we can use any question here. So why this term? And for the icon themselves, let me quickly go to remixicon.com. And now we can look for the icons. So the first icon is going to be plus, which is actually called add. We can paste it in here. I'm going to give this an additional class just so that I can manipulate it a lot easier without having to type this whole thing. And this one, we can just say icon, add icon. Then we need another icon. This is going to be the negative, no result, minus, nope, maybe subtract, and yes, that's what they call it. And we can paste this one down here. And we'll do the same thing and add an additional class. So subtract icon, just like so. And for some reason I had this open, although there was nothing there. But now we can see the card itself, although it's not really much of a card yet, as you can see from the original design. But let's go ahead and keep working on it. So this we don't need anymore. We can go ahead and close it. Then what we do need is going to be a body for this that will contain the question answer as well as a button inside of it. So we can go underneath of the header and we will have a div with the class of accordion item body. Then we will have a p tag. This p tag is going to have the class of accordion item description. Again, we can just do some dummy text, and underneath we will have a button. We can call this accordion item button. Actually, we already have this here, so we can say, as opposed to accordion item, we can say accordion body instead, just so that we don't have conflicting styles here. And then we can say learn more. So that looks pretty good already. So the last thing that I'm going to do now is, since we have 4 of them, I'm going to copy this and then duplicate it down below a few more times. So let's grab the item as a whole. And should be grabbing the whole thing. And I'm going to paste it underneath. And now we should have 4 items here, which we do. So we can go ahead now and work on the CSS portion so that we can make this look a lot closer to what we have here. So let's now go back inside of Visual Studio Code and then inside of the styles.css. Here we can start with a basic reset, which will be setting the margin to 0 as well as the padding. Then we will set the box sizing to border box. Then the HTML document, I'm going to be setting the font size here to be 10 pixels in percentages, which is equal to 62.5%. And I'm doing this because I'm using rem units, so it makes the calculations a lot simpler. Now, as far as the body, here I'm going to be applying the Poppins font. The font family, Poppins, and then sans serif as a fallback. I also want to apply a background color. And as you can see here, we have a gradient, but I'm not going to put a lot of effort into the background itself. So what I'll do is just use the color picker here and grab this one. So EEF3 FD and EEF3 FD. And let's take a look at that. Looks pretty good. What I want to do next, let me set a font size here of 1.6 rem. So the entire body will have 16 pixels, and now the text is going to be larger. Looking at the design, the accordion itself has a background color of white. So let's go ahead and select that. But before, let me select all the anchor tags and set the text decoration to none. And for the buttons, the background color is going to be transparent, and the outline will be set to none for now. Now I'm going to select the accordion, and the background color here is going to be white as mentioned. And that looks better already. I also want to set a width here. So let's measure that really quick. And this is roughly going to be 700 pixels. So I'm going to set a max width of 70 rem. This way, it will not get larger than 70 rem, but it has room to get smaller if it needs to when it's in smaller screens. So if we take a look at that, it looks a lot better. Now, it's completely irrelevant, but I'm going to add a little bit of padding on the body so that we get some more separation and we can see this a lot better. So here, I'll do a padding of, let's just do 5 rem all around. It doesn't really matter. And now we can see things a lot better. So as I mentioned before, what I want to do is give this the padding all around this particular container, and then I'll do the same thing for the other ones. So roughly again, we can do about 65 pixels. And this is going to be on the accordion header. So let's take a look at that accordion header. And here we can do a padding all around of 1.5 rem. And let me just make sure that the padding is the same down here, which actually it isn't. It's actually a little bit larger. So let's just do 70 on the bottom. And for this, we can just say 6.5 top, 6.5 left and right, and then 7 on the bottom. And let's go ahead and take a look at that. And it looks a lot better already. Now I want to add some separation here between the title and my text. So let me get close to that, make it smaller, and we have about 40 rem of spacing. And this was again the accordion title. So we'll do a margin bottom here of 4 rem. That looks pretty good. The next thing that I want to do here is going to be changing the color of the border. So let me actually zoom in here, Control plus, and let me get the color. So here we have EFF for FC. So border bottom. Here we just want to manipulate the border of the HR. So border, we'll just make it 2 pixels, solid. And what was the color again? EFF, EFF, 4FC. Let's take a look at that. And it's actually pretty wide, but that's because it also has the border on the bottom. So we'll say border bottom, none. And now it's a little bit thinner. And it looks, let me actually zoom out. And it looks a lot closer to the one we have on the demo. Let me actually do 3 pixels here, see how that looks. And yeah, I guess that's fine. So aside from that, we want to do the same thing spacing wise on the items. So let's go ahead and select the items that we have here. And this will be the accordion item. The padding here is going to be roughly about the same. Let me just make sure. And why is this not growing? There we go. So we can roughly assume it's going to be about the same. So let me just copy this and paste it in here. Although we could also move this up here, but for now, I'll just keep it there. And that looks pretty good. Although the spacing is pretty large, but we can adjust it later. For now, let's just keep building out the styles, and depending on how it looks later, we can always change things and improve them. And seems like I actually forgot some text here. Learn more, which is this one right here. So find and replace. So learn more, learn, and then we can say learn more here. And that should be fixed now. And it is. So what we can do now is go ahead and play around with the header inside of the item. So that would be this right here. So accordion item header. And this will have a display of flex and the items aligned to the center. This way the button and the text is going to be perfectly aligned. We also have some spacing between them. So let's do that right here. And this is roughly 15 pixels. So we're going to apply a gap, a column gap actually, column gap, and we can do here 1.5 rem. And this should give us some separation, which it does. Now by default, we only want to show one icon, which is the plus icon, and then we can show the other one later. So let's hide the subtract icon. We'll set the display property to none. And now it's gone. And this button has a size as well. So let's go ahead and measure that really quickly. And seems like this will be, so roughly we can say about 35 pixels or so. Actually, this is a little bit larger. So it's more like 40 pixels. So we're going to select the button here, the accordion button. Actually, this one is the accordion item button. And this we can give it a width of 4 rem, a height of 4 rem as well. And then the border radius will be 50%. And now we have the rounded corners. We need to get rid of the border themselves and also make this font size larger. So font size, so first, font size, let's do 2 rem. That looks better. And as far as the border, I'll just do it here for every single button. So border, none. Just like so. Now, we also need to add a background here, but that's not until this item is active. So for the time being, we're not going to worry about that too much. So the next thing that I want to do is, let me go back to the original project here so that we can see where we're at. So what I'm assuming we want to do here, well, we also have some spacing here as well. And that's actually not going to work because once we add the background color here, it's going to basically take up all the space available there. So if I go back to the item, let me see. For example here, and I do a background color of red, you'll notice that it takes up the entire width of the accordion, which is not what we want. Instead, we only wanted to limit to this particular item, or the inside of the item, I should say. So what we are going to do is we will go back inside of the index.html, and we are going to grab the content inside of an item, and we want to wrap that around another container. So we can say accordion item, let's do inner. And then we want to paste it inside of it. Now let's get rid of all the other ones, the old ones that we had. And then let's copy the new one and paste it down below 3 more times. Let me actually add a space here just so that it's more readable. And now if we added this background color that we have here to the actual item inner, this should still be white. So let me grab the color again. This one is going to be E. Oh, I already think we have this for the border, so let me just double check. And we do. So now if I say accordion item, so accordion item inner, and we set a background color here, which I thought I copied from this one. So background color, we should be able to now only have the background color on here. So that's exactly what we want. Now, something else that I'm noticing here is that we're going to need some spacing inside of this item inner, which is going to roughly be, let's say, it's roughly about 20 rem. Well, not 20 rem, but 20 pixels, which is going to be 2 rem. So here we can do a padding all around of 2 rem. And yes, we do. So it looks a lot better. Another thing that I want to do here, if we go back to the original design, we have to add some spacing here as well. And we have to make sure that, because right here, it doesn't really have any, but I'm trying to think, because if I do add it there, well, I guess we won't know until we try. So let's go ahead and do that and see how we fare out. So let's keep going with the calculations here. So roughly we have a spacing here of maybe 40 rem. Well, not 40 rem, I keep confusing it, but 40 pixels. And then it's roughly the same here. So let's go ahead and we have to make sure that we also line up this text with this start of the question. So we would need some additional padding there. And the padding, what is it again? Let me double check. Here we have about 80. Let's try that out and see how it goes. And this would go on the accordion body. So let's do a padding. And for now, let's just do 4 rem, top and bottom, and then 80 rem, left and right. Well, that's actually too much. So let's open up the inspector. And then if we go ahead and grab the body, we have 8 here. Let's do 7 instead. Maybe we can do 6 or 5. And this seems like 5. Well, we do have the gap there, so we have to compensate for that. So let's do 5.5. So 5.5 seems to work here. And as far as the spacing here from the top, it looks pretty good too. So here we can do 5.5 instead. And that should be good. Although by default, obviously we don't want to see the background. We only want to see it when we do have this item active. But for the time being, we can just keep it there so that we can see what's going on. Something else I noticed here is that the spacing is pretty large for each individual item. So roughly we only have about 60 here for the spacing between them. And what we have here for the project itself, we have 65 there, but the thing is, like, once you add it to the top here as well, now it becomes double that. So I think we have to compensate for the padding here, and what we can do is just target every single item that is not the first one, and we can remove the margin top. So let's go back and try that out. And let's find the item here. So we can say accordion item, and then not first of type. And then in here, we can say that the margin top will be 0. So let's take a look at that. And seems like it didn't work. So accordion item, first of type. Oh, obviously the reason why it didn't work is because this is padding, not margin. So if we go and take a look now, it should work, and it does. So we only get the padding top on the first one, and then the other ones will not have it, but they still have the padding on the bottom. And yeah, everything else looks pretty good. And let me double check here. Yep, everything looks good there. And I guess now we just focus on the button. So if we go back, well, we still have to do smaller things, such as the background here on this, and switching the icons, but we don't have to worry about any of that till we actually get into the JavaScript portion. So for this button itself, let me get the measurements again. So here we have roughly about 40 pixels. And then this is closer to about 10. And let's go ahead and target the button now. So this was the accordion body button. And here we will have a padding of 40 left and right and 1 rem top. Let's see now. Well, let's apply background color just so that we can see better. Background color. And then the color that we have for this one is going to be the following. So 6B63. 6B63 FA. And yeah, that looks good. So let me make sure that the text here is white. Color will be white. And we also want the border radius. Let's do 2 rem to round the corners, just like so. And we need to make this a display of inline block so that it at least will respect the spacing we have there with the padding. So display inline block. And as you can see, it now respects the spacing. Now for the spacing itself that we have here between the button and the text, here we just have, I think it was 40. So roughly 35. And we can apply this to the item description instead. And this will be a margin bottom of 3.5 rem. And now we have the separation here between the item. So that already looks pretty good. Let me just compare once more. I guess that the final steps now is making this functional using JavaScript. And the first thing I'll do here beforehand is just hide all this content so that we can only see the question. So let's go ahead and find the body. So it was the accordion body, item body, I should say. Accordion item body. So here we can do a height, well, max height. And we can set that to 0. We have some overflow there. So we can get rid of it by using overflow hidden. And we can still see it, but the reason for that is because I'm assuming the padding that's there. And yeah, we have padding there, so that's an issue. If we get rid of it, you see that we now get the question. So item body padding. Maybe we can get away there with using margins, or maybe just adding it later on when the actual item is active. So maybe what we can do is go ahead and try that. And yeah, I guess we'll just try that for now. So the padding here, we'll just comment it out for the time being. And I also don't want to see the background color here by default. And we place that on the inner. So what I can do here is actually say that when I hover my item, for example, we can say accordion item, unhover. I want to, well, not the accordion item, obviously it has to be this one, since it will be the same deal with the background, just like spreading all across the entire accordion. So let me just copy this, paste it down here, change this to hover, and then get rid of the padding. And I'll do the same thing for the background. And now if we go ahead and just hover over it, Well, let me get out of the responsive view first. Now we get to see the highlight. Let's also make sure that we add a transition here. So transition will be on the background color over, let's do 0.25 seconds. So now it looks more fluid. Let me also so now when we go ahead and hover over the item, it gives it the appearance that it's clickable. Obviously nothing is going to happen yet. So the next thing that I want to do is show this when we click it. But first, we will just try all this out with hover effects. And then later, we can go ahead and add the JavaScript functionality. So now we can go ahead and say that on the item, for example here, so let me just have a comment, replace with JS. And then I'll just copy this, paste it down below. And then everything we have here is going to be replaced with JavaScript later. So accordion item unhover. I want to target the accordion body. Accordion item body actually. And if you remember, we gave this where is it? So we gave it a max height of 0. So for this example, let me just actually put this all the way to the end. So here we can do a max height. For this demo, let's just do 250 pixels, which is 25 rem. And if we go ahead and check that out, when we hover over it, we can now see the item. We also want to reapply that padding that we removed. And this was right here. So let's just copy that. Paste it here, just like so. And that's looking a lot better. So let's add some transitions as well. So here that should be on the body. So transition, max height, and we're 0.25 seconds as well. And we have an issue because now since the hover effect is over, this just goes back to its original state. So instead, maybe what we can do is just have padding here. Well, we already have padding, so what I meant is margins maybe. So let's see what we can do. So by default, maybe we should just have margins instead. So let's try that out, see how it looks. So we can say margin. So top and bottom, and then left and right. And if we get rid of the padding from here, now if we hover over it, but the issue here is that now, since we have the margins, everything else is just getting pushed down. So maybe we'll just keep it on the left and right and add it in on the top and bottom once this is active. So what we can do is say top and bottom here is going to be 0. And then margin here, top and bottom 4. And then we still get to keep the 5.5 that we had here. So let's take a look at that. So that kind of solves our issue. So what I want to do now is transition the margin so that it looks like it's moving down when we hover in, and then moves back up when we hover out. So here, can you transition margins? Let me see. Margin 0.25 seconds. And we can, so that's pretty good actually. Now, the only thing missing here is this background color on the plus sign when we hover over this. So let's go back inside of the style sheet, and here we want to grab the button. So that's going to be the button at the bottom. The one we want is the item button. And it's going to be the same deal here. So accordion item, unhover. We want to grab this one right here. And then we want to add a background color. So the background color is going to be white. And if we take a look at that, you see that the background color is now showing up. Maybe we should transition it as well. So we can just go ahead and grab this transition from here and add it here, and then we can just clean that up and make it so that it only transitions the background color. Just like so. So the one thing that I want to point out now is that since you have a fixed height here, when we hover over it, that could cause some issues if you have a lot of content inside of some of the items. So I'll show you what I mean. So let's say that I had more content inside of here, like so. You'll notice now that it's not showing up because there's just too much. And this is where JavaScript is going to come in, because we're going to be using JavaScript to kind of get like all the content that is inside of this item or any other item depending on the content that it has. And then we are able to show everything as opposed to having a fixed height. We just basically set it dynamically. So let's go back inside of the style sheet. And what I want to do here on the styles that I'm supposed to replace is I'm going to have an active class. And here, I'll do the same as well. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply this active class to the item that we have here. And what we will do is from there, apply the styles to the children inside of them, which is going to be this accordion item body as well as the accordion item button. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. But before that, let me just take a look at the project that we had before, just to make sure that I'm not missing something. So yeah, we also have to make sure that we switch this icon when we have the active class. So let's go ahead and write the styles for that. So when the active class is present, we can target the subtract icon, and then we can say display will be block, and then again active, and then the add icon, and this one will be hidden. So display none. So again, when this active class is present, the subtract icon will now be visible and the add icon is going to be hidden. So let's now go inside of the JavaScript file. And the first thing that I'm going to do here is grab this accordion item. And next, I'm going to store this into a variable, which I'm going to be calling the same thing, accordion item, or items, doesn't really matter. Then document.query selector all. Since we are going to be looping over all of them, we have to make sure that we grab all of them and not just the first one. Then we will use the for each method on this accordion items variable. And what we're seeing here is that we want to store whatever item we click on inside of this placeholder. You could call this anything you wanted, to be honest. So then we'll continue with an arrow function. And inside of here, this is where we are going to write the logic. So what we want to do is attach an event listener to this element. So element, add event listener, and this will be of click. Then we can just have another arrow function here. And then inside of here, we can go ahead and toggle the class. So element, class list, toggle, and then the class that we want to toggle is going to be the active class. So if we go ahead and test that out, now when we click over the item, you see that if we click it again, it's gone. And then every single one of them is going to work. And one thing I noticed is that since we have it on the item itself, I'm wondering if I should just set it on the inner, which probably that's what I'm going to do. So let me just make sure that I don't mistype the class. So I'm going to grab the accordion item inner instead and paste it in here. And this should still work exactly the same, except that now it doesn't work if we click the item. It only works when we click this container. So that's pretty good. Now we can go ahead and get rid of the fixed height that we had here, since we don't really need it, on the active accordion item body. And I didn't notice if this was working where we switch over the icons. So let me just go back and double check. So yes, this is working as well. And since the height is removed, this is not going to show up. So what we are going to do now is using JavaScript again to dynamically add the height based on the content that is inside of here. So back within the app.js, what we can do here is say that we want to check if for example, the element, the current active element has an active class. So for that, we can just have an if statement. And here, what we can do is say if element class list contains active, then we want to do something. And we're also going to be having an else case. So what we want to do in here is say that we want to grab the height, including the content that is hidden of that particular element. And in this case, the element that is currently hidden is going to be the accordion item body. And then once we figure that out, we want to take that height and add it. And then if not, well, if we click it again, then we just switch it to 0 pixels. So to do that, we have to select this accordion item inner, which we already did. Then what we want to do is grab its last child, which is going to be this accordion body right here. So what we can say is element, which again is going to refer to this accordion body, accordion item inner. Then we want to grab the last child, as opposed to the first one, which is going to be the header. So we can use this property, I think it's last element child. Then we want to manipulate the styles. In this case, the style that we want to manipulate is going to be the max height. Max height. And then we want to set it equal to whatever the height of that item is. So in this case, we want to basically do the same thing here. So we want to grab the element last child's height. And to do that, we will use the scroll height. And then we have to concatenate it with pixels, since we are passing in a pixel value. So let's go ahead and test that out to see if it works. And as you can see, it now works. It shows everything because it's grabbing the element's height, including whatever is hidden, and adding it here. So it's being added dynamically. But as you can see, if we click it again, it stays. It's not gone. And then everything else still going to work the same. So this is where the else case is going to come into play. But before we get to that, I just noticed that I forgot to add this background color to the active state, which is active right now. So it should have this background color as well. So let's quickly sort that out. Let's jump back inside Visual Studio Code, scroll up, and let's find the hover state, which is this one right here for the accordion item inner. And we'll bring it down here. Then we have to get rid of this hover state, and we want to chain the classes here and make sure that it's chained with the active class. Because remember, here we are applying the active class to the element. So this just says that if the accordion item inner has the class of active, we also want to apply this background color, as opposed to here, which means when an element, in this situation, the accordion item button that is inside this element with the class of active, then we want to do something. So that's the difference there. It's really important that you chain the classes in this situation. So if we go back now, everything should be working flawlessly. Just like so. So now it's active, and then when we click it, it's no longer active, so it's gone. Now let's sort out the issue with the height. So going back to Visual Studio Code, inside of here, we're going to grab everything up to the point of the equal sign, paste it inside the else case, and then we just say 0 pixels, just like so. And now when we click it, you see that we get the effect that we want, and the same thing will happen if we click it again. So that's basically it for this particular video. I hope you guys found it useful, and if you learned something new, make sure you thumbs up the video, leave a comment down below if you have any additional questions, and if you still haven't subscribed, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Also, I wanted to point out that this should be pretty responsive by default. Obviously, it's not going to be perfect, but you could tweak this spacing wise just to make sure that the text is better adjusted. I'm not going to do this in this video. It is completely up to you if you want to do it though. Now, I'll catch you guys in the next one.